Welcome once again to Chelan County Connection. I'm your host, Randy Rhodes. Today we're joined by Sasha Sleiman. Sasha's the Chelan County Housing Program Manager. Welcome to the program.
Thanks. It's so good to be here with you.
Well, let's pull the curtain a little bit back on Sasha. Where are you from? What's your background? And how did you end up being the program manager for Chelan County Housing?
Well, I'm from here, Randy. I was born here at Central Washington Hospital and grew up here, went to university over on the west side at Western Washington, and then pursued my master's after that and lived all over the place, California, Arizona, New York, and then finally came back here in very early 2019, just in time for the pandemic, when I was working at the Chamber of Commerce there and doing their government affairs and kind of communications. And then I met a ton of all of the local elected officials and got to know kind of how local government worked. And so when Chelan County had this opportunity to manage the homeless housing programs, housing is a big topic for me, a big important topic. So I threw my hat in the ring and came over to the government side of things and have been here since June of 2021 when we started the program.
Well, we sure appreciate everything you do. And today we're talking a very important topic, and that's the homeless in our area, not only Chelan, but Douglas County as well. And we're going to get to that in a moment. This is one of the newer programs in the county. How long has the program been around?
Yeah, it started in June of 2021. The counties, both Chelan and Douglas, signed an interlocal agreement just before I was hired to manage the dollars that go to support our community partners, nonprofits in the area to address homelessness. And the county, this is new for the county to manage these funds. So they needed somebody to come on board and do that work. So we've started there with new contracts in July of that year. And we've been working with 10 different community providers to do anything from emergency shelter and hotel vouchers all the way to rental assistance and preventative legal aid. So we have about 10 different grants with those agencies. So it's a lot of good work going on in the Valley.
Sasha, is the homeless issue different here in the Valley than, let's say, a larger city?
Yeah, I think it is. It's interesting. Homelessness is something that no jurisdiction across the country has kind of gotten right, so to speak. And it's because every single municipality, community is a little bit different. So we're obviously more rural. Even our urban core, the cities of East Wenatchee and Wenatchee themselves are still rural in comparison to a Seattle or Los Angeles. And then so even within our microcosm, there's different circumstances around homelessness here in the urban core and let's say rural northern Douglas County or the Chelan Valley. We focus a lot on prevention in the rural areas, trying to keep people in their housing with rental assistance and maybe hotel vouchers to get them through to their next situation. And then here in the urban core, the city's really focusing on emergency shelters, emergency response. And then there's also this kind of overriding overall system where we want to focus on long-term housing. How do you go from that emergency shelter into a transitional housing situation and then on to permanent supportive? Because everybody's situation is a little bit different. And then, of course, services kind of get condensed usually in an urban core. So it is a little bit different. And I think we very much have a different situation on our hands than other places in Washington. And so we like to do things a little differently, collaborate a little bit more, and make sure that we're doing what's right for our local community.
Sasha, a lot of us have read about or heard about the point in time count. Now, what is that and when did that happen?
Yeah, so the homeless point in time count is something that's done nationwide over the month of January. It's always done in the winter, usually in January. We did ours here January 26th. And it's the purpose of it is to get a snapshot of the jurisdiction's homeless situation, how many individuals are living on the street, how many people are staying in shelters or hotels, and just get that snapshot of what our situation is locally. But it's also done in every jurisdiction across the country. So you'll start seeing comparisons nationwide as well.
Sasha, can you share the results of that count with us?
Yeah, so we went out on January 26th, had a lot of volunteers from the different nonprofit groups who work with the unhoused community, and we issued surveys. So the survey collected a lot of different data around their demographics, the situation that people are in, and then also what they kind of how we can help them, if you will, people needed immediate services that day or not. So from that survey, we gathered that 105 people are living on the street, meaning a park or an abandoned building, somewhere outside a vehicle even. And then we also found that 368 people were residing or staying in a shelter of some kind. Beyond that, 368, that's kind of the formal shelter count that's pulled from our database. I partnered with my colleague over in the Chelan County Regional Justice Center, who collected information from people who were incarcerated, that if they were released from jail the day of our point in time count, if they would have been released onto the street, we wanted to get some of their information as well. And there were 36 people who were incarcerated that day, that if they weren't, they would have been on the street. And similarly, I partnered with the Center for Alcohol and Drug Treatment, and there were 5 people staying there. So that's not something that's collected in the point in time count. You won't necessarily see those numbers other places in Washington or nationwide, but I felt it was really important for our policymakers to understand that there may not be people whose information we gathered on that day because they were in a situation temporarily like jail or a facility. This number of sheltered people was up from last year. We had 275 people staying in some kind of a shelter, and our unsheltered count, people staying outside, was down. We had 105 this year and 123 last year. So if you do the math, there's a few more people in the situation overall, but I'm happy that more of them this year are in shelters. This is a bit more secure and safe for them and for everyone in the community. So that's really wonderful. And I think that shows a ton of work on the part of our nonprofit partners, the cities and what they've implemented. So then some other data we collected was kind of how long people are experiencing homelessness. So the state has a definition called chronically homeless, and that means if you're homeless for more than a year, and there were 41 out of that 105 who identified that they've been on the street more than a year. But 34 people indicated this was their first time, and that's something that has come up a lot with our nonprofits. We're seeing a lot of people who are becoming homeless, newly becoming homeless, which you can imagine, inflation, the price of rent, the price of groceries. There's a lot of things constraining families these days. And then speaking of things that constrain people, we asked kind of how people got into their situation. So the top 4 reasons, and you could select as many of these as was relevant, but the top 4 reasons people became homeless. The first one was eviction or housing loss. 37 people indicated that, or that was indicated 37 times. Job loss was indicated 25 times. Mental illness 18 times, and alcohol or substance use was indicated 16 times. So that kind of gives us an idea of what people are struggling with, so that we can gear policies and relief to prevent people from becoming homeless in the future.
Sasha, just for clarification, are these numbers we're talking both counties together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we surveyed people all across the counties. We had several nonprofit partners here in the Wenatchee Valley going out to Malaga, Rock Island, East Wenatchee. We had partners, Chelan Valley Hope, up in the Chelan area, doing Northern Douglas County, Chelan Valley, Eniat. And then we had our partners, Upper Valley Mend, talking to people in Leavenworth, up Blewett, down to Kashmir. The majority of people that we talked to were in the urban core, as I refer to it, the Wenatchee, East Wenatchee city limits, 46 people and 15 respectively in Wenatchee and East Wenatchee. And then we met with several people out in the Chelan area, about 15 people. And that's something that is of note, I would say. The Chelan area, as well as unincorporated Douglas County, we were able to, through partnerships and just more intentional outreach, Chelan Valley Hope was able to connect over the course of the year with more individuals experiencing homelessness in those areas that have been really hard to find. You can imagine in rural areas, you can kind of go different places and stay off the grid. But we've been able to connect folks with more resources in those areas.
Sasha Sleiman is the Chelan County Housing Program Manager. The numbers are in. Now, what happens with the results?
Yeah, so these results are used by our policymakers, elected officials, kind of to see what's needed. Both the Chelan Douglas Task Force, Homeless Housing Task Force, and the Columbia River Task Force, which is spearheaded by the two cities, are responsible for making 5-year action plans over the course of the next couple of years that will go into effect 2025 on. And so this information year to year can be used to help us figure out what the needs are in the community and how best to respond to those. But also the nonprofit providers are interested in the results because then they can gear their programming towards them. For example, if we survey a lot more women, for example, than we were expecting, and we don't have enough beds for women, then that indicates to the nonprofit providers, how can I change my program? How can I increase more women's beds or things like that? So both nonprofit and municipal policymakers will use these results to craft responses.
You know, Sasha, we were speaking before the program, and I think there's some misconception or myths out there. For example, are all the homeless, did they come from the West Side? Are they on drugs? Can't they find a job? What are the things you're hearing?
Yeah, those are the three big ones that I hear a lot. Are people being shipped here, so to speak? And no, a lot of people ask if people are coming from the West Side, and actually, according to our point in time count, 65 people say that they lost their most recent permanent housing here in Chelan or Douglas County, as compared to 6 who said they were originally out of state, and 23 from just Washington in general. So the vast majority of folks who are unhoused are our community members. They're our neighbors. And are they all on drugs? Hear it a lot. And yes, substance use is a big challenge for folks on the street, but it's not necessarily the leading cause of homelessness. Only 42 people identified that they have an issue with substance use. And while finding folks who are battling that, the right treatment opportunities and getting them the right resources is really critical and part of our planning and processes. It's not the main issue, I should say. And then the job part is really interesting. Why can't these folks just get a job, right? It's pretty hard to get a job. I'd say if you don't have a stable place to live or you're in crisis, things you and I, Randy, probably take for granted, getting to wake up and shower, having an address for an employer to get back to, having a driver's license. It's pretty important for applying for a job. And so these are all things that we try to address with different services. So for example, the Wenatchee Rescue Mission has been working to connect folks who are staying in their shelter, getting them IDs, for example. They've also worked with other partners like Action Health Partners to get folks enrolled in Medicare, Medicaid if they qualify, working with our Chelan County Veterans Service Office to get veterans connected with the benefits that they need. So a lot of connecting folks with the types of things that they need in order to get a job or to stay healthy. But you'd be surprised, or I was surprised. I won't put it on you, Randy. But I was surprised how many folks are working, are in the Wenatchee Rescue Mission. About 40 or so folks in the safe parks and the shelter are working. They have jobs right now and are employed full or part-time. And then the other large majority are disabled in some way, can't work any longer, are retired. So we have, kind of a mixed bag here. We actually have a lot more folks, elderly, who are unhoused or in a shelter, and they're outside of the working age. So homelessness isn't just, people in their 20s, 30s, hanging out on the street with drug problems and lazy and can't get jobs. These are folks who lost their housing for a variety of reasons, have huge challenges against them, or don't have the right means to continue on and get their own stable housing. And that's what we're here to help them with.
Sasha, there's a lot we'd like to do as individuals. I personally don't give cash. I might drop by a bag of burgers and fries, that kind of thing. What can we do?
Yeah, I think we have such a caring community. People want to help and want to give, and that's amazing. So my recommendation would be to have on your phone the Chelan County Housing page pinned. We have a list of resources for folks, but we also have a link there to what's called our coordinated entry system. And that's something that if you're comfortable having a conversation with someone about their situation, you could help them to fill that out if they were interested. I met a woman, for example, in a parking lot when I was picking my dad up from work, and she asked for money, and I had a quick chat with her about what she needed, and what she needed really was housing and getting connected into our services. And so I helped her fill that out. Took about 5 minutes of my time, got her on the list for housing, and then that way someone can follow up with her. So, even if it's just phoning, if you don't want to interact with someone, giving the Wenatchee Rescue Mission a phone call. Their number can be found if you Google them. They have an outreach team, and they're more than happy to come out and connect with folks. So if you saw somebody on the corner of a couple of streets and you called them just to say, hey, there's someone, at this location, I'm a concerned citizen, you might want to go out. I'm sure they'd be happy to do that. We usually know where most folks are, and we do, outreach teams do try to connect with people, but continuing to get them connected to services is always really helpful.
Sasha, what would you like to see long term with your program?
Yeah, collaboration and communication is really the biggest thing for me. Homelessness isn't something that we can just solve. It's a huge issue, and it's something that we can work together to prevent or decrease. We can work on solutions that address the situations that people find themselves in before becoming homeless. So my long-term goal would be to address this from a multifaceted approach and collaboration, and getting it to the point where through our coordinated entry system, for example, getting us to a point as a community where all of our nonprofit partners, all of our healthcare providers, all of our government agencies have a really solid communication network and can give warm handoffs and help clients go from place to place instead of just sending them somewhere, but rather holding their hand, so to speak, and getting them connected to the right resources, and not just saying, hey, Joe, you should head down to Community Action Council, and that not be the right place for Joe, right? So having that open collaboration and communication is my biggest goal, and something that we're making strides towards, and just knowing that we are one really connected community. We're really technically two communities, right? But we work as one, and that's really important. So I'm hoping that our program can work collaboratively with all the elected officials in the region and community stakeholders, and find solutions at all of our different housing levels. We've been talking today about homelessness, but workforce housing is a critical issue. We have housing challenges in this community, from those who are the poorest among us to those who are coming here to work and can't find the right place to live or afford, and they have to turn down jobs, or workers who work in our hospitality industry who are getting priced out of their community and can no longer afford to work in a place where they're making just above minimum wage. So this is a big issue, and it's all related. So not just focusing on homeless, but rather the full big picture.
Sasha Sleiman, our guest this time out on Chelan County Connection. Before we get to any closing thoughts, first of all, congratulations on a job well done. There's always more to do. How do you feel about the program so far?
It's been a steep learning curve, but it's an issue that I'm really passionate about, and something that I think we can all kind of work together to make a difference in. And like I said, not solve. It's really a key thing there, but it's a great great program to be a part of and to help build, and the partners that I get to work with are just absolutely incredible. And I think that's, we were talking about misconceptions earlier. I think one of the things is that people may not realize how much work is being done by our nonprofits in the area. We have some really amazing nonprofits, and the city municipalities, the county municipalities, everyone kind of, working together to do this. So it's been really interesting.
Chelan County Housing Program Manager Sasha Sleiman, thanks for joining us this time out on Chelan County Connection.
Thank you.